I feel that this is going to severely affect the way we live our lives, and the way we work for probably 2 or 3 years to come.
You must stay at home. Whatever it takes. We will beat the coronavirus, and we will beat it together.
Welcome back to Ask Dr. Hillary, Coronavirus Explained. Let's start about the exit strategy. There's been a bit of debate about this, whether the government actually has one or not. Matt Hancock's obviously talking about actually we need to focus on the delay stage of the virus and then move on to that. What comes next? What is our exit strategy?
The exit strategy will depend on the number of cases that we're seeing, how the NHS is getting on coping with the demand from patients who are sick, and how well people are socially distancing themselves from other people and obeying the guidance. So it's difficult to say exactly what the exit strategy will be and when it will take place, but basically the strategy is to cope with the number of patients coming in by flattening the curve, not seeing so many patients all at once. We're going to see more patients, but we don't want them all at once, and that's what lockdown is all about. So when we start to see a fall in the number of people testing positive and being admitted to hospital, then we can think about a graduated de-restriction of lockdown, allowing certain sections of society out from lockdown, and then others later on. So it's going to be graded, and it's going to be dependent on what we see in terms of patient numbers and prevalence of the virus in the general population.
What can we learn from other viruses that have happened in the past, for example, the Spanish flu, and how to deal with an exit strategy properly? Because obviously we want to avoid there being a huge second wave or even a third wave of the virus.
We have to remember that a lot of people are comparing this pandemic to the pandemic of 1918. What we know then is that swept the world, and something like 50 million people lost their lives, often young, fit, healthy people otherwise. More people who died in the war. And it was a dreadful pandemic. Of course, then we didn't have antibiotics to treat secondary bacterial infection. The state of housing was much poorer. Poverty was greater. People had just come through a war, and we weren't able to isolate people in splendid hospitals as we can now. So the circumstances are very different. However, what we do know about that virus was that it came back, it resurged a year later in a different form, and a lot of people in that second wave lost their lives because they had an overwhelming immune response, having been exposed to it before. So we can learn that we must never be complacent with this particular virus. It's very nasty, it's very contagious, it's very virulent for some people, and it can change the way our immune systems behave and work. So we will not be complacent. We will be very cautious about the treatments we use and the freedom we give to people afterwards, in terms of can they really relax, and do we need to remain vigilant as scientists and doctors? And I think that will be the case.
Obviously, the question everyone wants to know is, when will this lockdown end? We don't know the answer to that. Could be months, could be weeks, whatever. But I want to ask you, how long could this virus affect our lives just generally? I mean, will we see years down the line still having to comply by certain measures to prevent this? Or do you think that, by the end of, let's say, a year, it's not going to have much effect in our lives?
Well, my view is that we have to be patient. We can see what's happened around the world. We can see what's happening in our hospitals. We can see how many people are losing their lives to this virus, both patients with pre-existing conditions, young, fit, healthy people, frontline workers. And so we must be patient and see how this pans out. But what I would say is this: my own personal view is that we need to be ready to stay at home for quite a bit longer than people are currently talking about. I wouldn't be surprised if that period is 3 months or 4 months until we get a handle on this. And I feel that this is going to severely affect the way we live our lives, and the way we work for probably 2 or 3 years to come. And I'll say why, and that is because We won't be able to rush back to work. The jobs will be different. I think in terms of employment, employers have discovered that actually there are many ways to work. Other than coming into the office or traveling around the world, people can do a lot of work from home. That may not be a bad thing. I think that people will be starting having lost a lot of money, and therefore they won't be buying the luxury goods, and retailers of luxury goods will have to be prepared to take a hit until the economy recovers, which could take a while. And we've heard a lot about footballers and entertainers, haven't we, who earn big salaries, and they may feel that it'll be fine later on, but they're dependent on people buying season tickets and travelling to away matches, and people may not have that kind of money in the near future. So I think everybody needs to say, well, what's important in life? Is it friends and family and just being healthy, or is it earning shed loads of cash? And for me, I think people will, they'll reset the values that they have in life, and they'll say, what's really important is coming through this with all my friends and family healthy and well, and able to do work that we enjoy, that doesn't necessarily pay us shed loads of money and gives us all the luxury goods, because we've realised that they aren't that important. But that's just my personal view.
Fantastic. Right. We'll move on to the people's questions. The first one is from Patty Cameron. They ask, will everyone eventually get some form of coronavirus?
No, not everybody will get this. We know from previous pandemics that some people, for whatever reason, random or state of health, escape it. They just never come across the virus. Some people have said that they think about 80% of the UK population will be exposed to the virus at some point. Other people think 50%. Some people think 80% have already had it. We just don't know because we can't do the testing. But no, not everyone will get this. And the whole one of the reasons that we have lockdown is to protect the very vulnerable from getting it ever. We don't want people with pre-existing conditions, people who are elderly, to ever come across the virus. And if we can protect them, then we'll be saving tens, probably hundreds of thousands of lives.
Question 2 is from Maggie Callahan. Now, she asks, if the virus is supposedly killed by heat, how is it that Australia has cases when it's their summer at the moment?
Well, actually, I've heard the opposite. The virus flourishes in colder climates, but we're seeing the same sort of cases in Australia and Indonesia and China, where the climate is warmer than it is here currently in the northern hemisphere. So I don't think we can rely on the climate to change the prevalence of the disease at all. The virus is fragile, but we know it can exist in moderate climates pretty well, whether it's Australia, Indonesia, China, India, you name it. Most countries, most continents in the world have been affected by the virus, and climate doesn't seem to make much difference.
Let's say the virus got onto some bit of metal in India or Australia and it was really hot. Would that be killed by the virus, just out of curiosity?
Yeah, we think that above 60 degrees and the virus struggles. So washing clothes in washes which are over 60, 65 is almost certainly going to kill off the virus, kills off that lipid layer, which just like any fat tends to dissolve. So in terms of washing hands in hot water and washing clothes in hot washes, that's probably pretty important.